Hello, my good friends. Let's get some idea about aperture, shutter speed, and ISO in today's session. First of all, let's talk about aperture. Aperture refers to the opening or hole in a camera lens through which light passes to enter the camera and reach the image sensor or film. It is a crucial component in photography and plays a significant role in determining the exposure, depth of field, and overall image quality. Here are some key points to note about aperture. 1. Aperture size. Aperture size is typically measured in f-stops, represented as f1.4, f2.8, f5.6, etc. The smaller the f-stop number, the larger the aperture opening, and vice versa. For instance, f1.4 has much wider opening than fade. 2. Exposure. Aperture directly affects the amount of light that reaches the camera sensor. A wider aperture, lower f-stop number, allows more light to enter, resulting in a brighter exposure. Conversely, a narrower aperture, higher f-stop number, restricts light, leading to a darker exposure. 3. Depth of field, DOF. Aperture also impacts the depth of field in an image, which refers to the range of sharpness from the foreground to the background. A wider aperture, e.g. f2.8, results in a shallow depth of field, where only the subject is in focus while the background is blurred. A narrower aperture, e.g. f11, produces a deeper depth of field, keeping more of the scene in focus. 4. Bokeh, wide apertures, especially in prime lenses with low f-stop values, e.g. f1.4, can create a beautiful bokeh effect. Bokeh refers to the out-of-focus areas in an image, and a wide aperture can make these areas appear smooth and creamy, enhancing the subject separation. 5. Lens characteristics. Different lenses have specific maximum aperture capabilities. Some lenses are described as fast because they can achieve wide apertures, e.g. f1.8, and allow more light, making them suitable for low light conditions and creative photography. 6. Aperture priority mode. In modern digital cameras, there's an aperture priority mode, usually denoted as A or AV on the mode dial. This allows photographers to manually set the desired aperture while the camera automatically adjusts the shutter speed for a correct exposure. In summary, aperture is a critical aspect of photography that affects exposure, depth of field, and creative possibilities. Understanding how to control and use aperture effectively can significantly enhance the quality and impact of your images. However, I can describe 10 types of photos that showcase the creative use of aperture settings, specifically those that demonstrate a pronounced and visually impactful depth of field. These images are intended to highlight the beauty and versatility of using different apertures in photography. 1. Single flower focus. A close-up shot of a single flower, where the photographer uses a wide aperture, e.g. f2.8, to create a shallow depth of field. The main subject, the flower, is sharply focused, while the background blurs into a soft and colorful bokeh. 2. Portrait with bokeh background. A portrait photograph taken with a wide aperture, e.g. f1.8, to achieve a shallow depth of field. The subject's face is in sharp focus, while the background is transformed into a pleasing, creamy bokeh that adds a dreamy and artistic touch. 3. Food photography. An image of a delicious dish captured with a moderate aperture, e.g. f5.6, creating a selective focus on the main elements of the food. This technique brings out the textures and details of the dish while pleasantly blurring the background. 4. Wildlife close-up. A wildlife photograph of a bird or animal shot at a wide aperture, e.g. f4, to isolate the subject from its environment. The creature's eyes and features are tack, sharp, drawing the viewer's attention. 5. Landscape with foreground interest. A landscape image taken with a narrow aperture, e.g. f11 or f16, to ensure sharpness throughout the frame. This technique works well when there are captivating foreground elements like flowers or rocks that add depth and lead the viewer into the scene. 6. Nighttime city lights. A cityscape taken at night with a narrow aperture, e.g. f16, to create a starburst effect on city lights. This adds a visually striking and dazzling appeal to the urban nightscape. 7. Waterfall with motion blur. A waterfall photographed with a slower shutter speed and a narrow aperture, e.g. f16. This combination creates a sharp image of the waterfall while capturing the flowing water with a beautiful motion blur effect. 8. Creative light play. An image captured with a very wide aperture, e.g. f1.4, where light sources are creatively manipulated, resulting in mesmerizing patterns and bokeh that seem to dance on the frame. 9. Portrait with environmental context. A portrait taken outdoors with a moderate aperture, e.g. f5.6, to maintain some background details. This approach provides context to the portrait by showcasing the subject's environment, such as a park or a city street. 10. Macro abstract. A macro shot of a textured surface like a leaf or bark, using a very wide aperture, e.g. f8.2, to create an abstract and painterly effect with the blurred colors and shapes in the background. These photos demonstrate the artistry and storytelling potential of using different aperture settings, allowing photographers to control depth of field and create unique and captivating images. Shutter speed is one of the 3 key elements of the exposure triangle in photography, along with aperture and ISO. It plays a vital role in controlling the amount of light that enters the camera and reaches the image sensor or film, influencing the overall exposure and various creative aspects of an image. Here's a more in-depth look at shutter speed. 1. Exposure control. Shutter speed determines the duration for which the camera's shutter remains open. A faster shutter speed, such as 1/1000th of a second, allows the sensor to be exposed to light for a very brief moment, resulting in less light reaching the sensor and a darker image. Conversely, a slower shutter speed, like 1/30th of a second, keeps the shutter open longer, allowing more light to reach the sensor and producing a brighter image. 2. Motion freeze. One of the primary functions of shutter speed is to freeze or capture motion. Fast shutter speeds, such as 1/1000th of a second or faster, are ideal for freezing fast, moving subjects, such as sports, wildlife, or a running child. This results in sharp and crisp images without any motion blur. 3. Motion blur. On the other hand, slower shutter speeds, such as 1/30th of a second or slower, introduce motion blur into an image. This can be creatively used to depict a sense of movement or dynamism, such as capturing the flowing water of a waterfall or the streaking lights of passing cars at night. 4. Handheld Vs. Tripod use. Shutter speed plays a crucial role in handheld photography. As a general rule of thumb, to avoid camera shake and maintain sharpness when hand-holding the camera, the shutter speed should be at least equal to the reciprocal of the focal length. If using a 50mm lens, the shutter speed should be 1 wins. The shutter speed should be 1/50th of a second or faster. For longer focal lengths or slower shutter speeds, a tripod or image stabilization becomes necessary. 5. Low light photography. In low light conditions, slower shutter speeds might be necessary to allow more light into the camera for a properly exposed image. However, this can also lead to motion blur, so a tripod or other stabilization methods are essential. 6. Shutter dragging. By using a combination of slow shutter speed and intentional camera movement, photographers can create artistic and abstract images with a sense of motion and emotion. This technique is known as shutter dragging. 7. Shutter priority mode. Many cameras offer a shutter priority mode, ES or TV mode, where the photographer selects the desired shutter speed and the camera automatically adjusts the aperture to achieve the correct exposure. 8. Bulb mode. In bulb mode, the photographer can manually control the length of time the shutter stays open. This mode is useful for long exposure photography, such as capturing star trails or fireworks. Here are 10 types of photos that showcase the creative use of shutter speed settings, specifically those that portray the effects of motion blur or motion freeze. These images demonstrate how different shutter speeds can add a sense of dynamism or stillness to a photograph. 1. Light trails at night. A cityscape photograph taken at a slow shutter speed, e.g. 10-30 seconds, to capture the light trails of moving vehicles, creating vibrant streaks of color across the frame. 2. Flowing water in a stream. A landscape shot of a flowing stream or waterfall taken with a slower shutter speed, e.g. 1/4 second, resulting in silky, smooth water with a beautiful motion blur effect. 3. Frozen action in sports. A sports photograph captured with a fast shutter speed, e.g. 1/1000th of a second or faster, to freeze the action, such as a soccer player mid-kick or a basketball player in mid-air. 5. Night sky with stars. A long exposure shot of the night sky using a slow shutter speed, e.g. 15-30 seconds, to capture star trails, showing the apparent movement of the stars across the sky. 6. Moving Ferris wheel. A fun fair or amusement park scene captured with a slower shutter speed, e.g. 1/4 to 1 second, to capture the spinning motion of a Ferris wheel, resulting in a circular motion blur. 7. Busy city street with blur. A bustling city street photographed with a slower shutter speed, e.g. 1/15 to 1/4 seconds, to capture the movement of pedestrians and vehicles, creating a sense of energy and activity. 8. Water droplet splash. A high-speed photograph of a water droplet hitting a liquid surface, taken with a fast shutter speed, e.g. U1/1000th of a second or faster, freezing the droplet at the moment of impact. 9. Wind-blown trees. A landscape photo taken on a windy day using a slower shutter speed, e.g. U1/15 to 1/4 seconds, capturing the movement of swaying trees, adding a sense of motion and drama to the scene. 10. Moving carousel. A carnival carousel captured with a slower shutter speed, e.g. 1/4 to 1 second, to capture the spinning motion, resulting in a dynamic and colorful image. These images showcase the diverse creative possibilities that arise from using different shutter speeds, allowing photographers to convey a sense of movement, stillness, and artistic flair in their photographs. Mastering shutter speed allows photographers to have more control over their images, creatively capture motion, and adapt to various lighting conditions to achieve stunning and visually engaging photographs. ISO in the context of a DSLR camera refers to the sensitivity of the camera's image sensor to light. It is one of the 3 key elements of the exposure triangle, along with aperture and shutter speed, that collectively determine the final exposure of an image. Understanding ISO and how it affects your photographs is essential for achieving the desired image quality in different lighting conditions. Here's a note on ISO in DSLR cameras. 1. ISO range. DSLR cameras typically offer a range of ISO settings, such as ISO 100, 200, 400, 800, and 1600, and so on. Lower ISO values, GEAEISO 100, represent low sensitivity to light, while higher ISO values, EAUSO 1600, or higher sensitivity. As you increase the ISO, the camera becomes more sensitive to light, allowing you to shoot in darker environments. 2. Exposure adjustment. ISO is a crucial tool for adjusting the exposure of your images. When shooting in low-light conditions or situations where you need a faster shutter speed or narrower aperture, increasing the ISO can help you achieve a proper exposure without underexposing the image. 3. Image quality. While higher ISO settings enable you to shoot in low light, they also introduce a trade-off in terms of image quality. Higher ISO values can result in digital noise or grain in the image, reducing the overall sharpness and clarity. On the other hand, lower ISO settings typically produce cleaner and more detailed images. 4. Noise reduction. Modern DSLR cameras often include built-in noise reduction algorithms to mitigate the negative effects of high ISO. While these noise reduction processes can help, they may also soften the image slightly, so finding the right balance is essential. 5. Base ISO. Each camera has a base ISO, which is usually the lowest native sensitivity setting that provides the best image quality. It's often around ISO 100 or 200. For the cleanest and most detailed images, photographers prefer to shoot at the base ISO whenever possible, especially in well-lit conditions. 6. Auto ISO. Many DSLR cameras offer an auto ISO option, where the camera adjusts the ISO sensitivity automatically based on the available light and the chosen aperture and shutter speed setting. This can be useful in situations where light conditions change rapidly and you want to maintain a consistent exposure. 7. Creative use of ISO. Besides adjusting exposure, ISO can be creatively used to achieve specific effects. For instance, deliberately using a higher ISO to introduce grain or noise can add a gritty or vintage look to your images, enhancing the atmosphere or mood. In summary, ISO is a crucial tool in a DSLR photographer's arsenal, allowing them to control exposure and shoot in various lighting conditions. However, it's essential to be mindful of the trade-offs in image quality when using higher ISO values and strive to use the lowest ISO setting possible to achieve the best results, especially in well-lit environments. Let's see 10 types of photos that demonstrate the creative use of ISO settings in photography. These images showcase how ISO sensitivity can be utilized to capture different lighting conditions and achieve various creative effects. 1. Nighttime cityscape with low light. A city skyline photographed at a high ISO, e.g. ISO 3200 or higher, to capture the city lights and details in low light conditions, resulting in a stunning nighttime cityscape. 2. Indoor concert or performance. A live music performance shot at a high ISO setting, e.g. ISO 1600, 3200, to capture the fast movement and vibrant atmosphere without the need for a flash. 3. Astrophotography. Starry night sky. A long exposure shot of the night sky using a high ISO setting, e.g. ISO 6400 or more, to capture stars and celestial objects, creating a captivating astrophotography image. 4. Candlelit portrait. A close-up portrait taken with a moderate ISO setting, e.g. ISO 800, in low-light conditions, highlighting the warm glow of candlelight on the subject's face. 5. High-speed action sports. A fast-paced sports event captured at a high ISO setting, e.g. ISO 3200 and 6400, to freeze the action, even under artificial lighting, without compromising the shutter speed. 6. Fireworks display. A fireworks show photographed at a high ISO setting, e.g. ISO 1600, to capture the vibrant colors and details in the night sky, while also preserving the motion of the firework. 7. Backlit portrait at sunset. A portrait taken against a vibrant sunset using a moderate ISO setting, e.g. ISO 400-800, to preserve the details in both the subject's face and the beautiful sunset background. 8. High contrast black and white. A black and white photograph taken at a higher ISO, e.g. ISO 1600-3200, to enhance the contrast and add a gritty, dramatic feel to the image. 9. Fast. Moving wildlife. A wildlife photograph taken at a high ISO setting, e.g. ISO 3200 or more, to freeze the quick movements of animals in their natural habitat, even in challenging lighting conditions. 10. Motion blur with grain. An artistic shot taken at a low ISO setting, e.g. ISO 100, and with a slow shutter speed, creating motion blur while introducing film grain for a vintage or nostalgic effect. These photos demonstrate how ISO settings can be creatively used to capture various subjects and scenes, adapt to different lighting conditions, and achieve specific artistic and storytelling effects in photography.